Creatures like you don't belong in courtrooms. You belong in chains. Those words would echo in Officer Daniel Martinez's mind for years, long after the video went viral, long after the lawsuits, long after the world learned exactly whom he had laid his hands on. But that morning, he spoke them with confidence. Judge Keisha Williams was walking up the courthouse steps in plain clothes, sunglasses on, carrying a slim black briefcase filled with motions she planned to review before hearings began. She wasn't wearing her robe, she never did until she was inside, and without it, without the badge of authority across her chest, she looked like any other black woman trying to get to work on time. To Martinez, that was more than enough reason to stop her. He stepped directly into her path, boots planted wide, hand resting on his holster in a way that made his intentions unmistakable. "Where do you think you're going?" he sneered. Keisha barely had time to breathe before his open hand whipped across her face. The crack echoed up the marble steps. Her head jerked to the side, sunglasses flying, the briefcase slipping from her fingers. Court papers spilled everywhere. Affidavits, transcripts, motions fluttering down the stairs like litter scattered by a storm. Martinez grabbed her throat with one hand and slammed her against the stone wall so violently that dust shook loose from the old brick. "I ask you a question," he growled, tightening his grip. "What business does trash like you have here?"
Keisha's pulse roared in her ears. Pain radiated through her jaw and neck, but she stayed focused on one thing. The bronze plaque mounted beside the double doors. Superior Court of Los Angeles, the Honorable Judge K. Williams. Her courtroom was 20 feet away. 20 feet! And here she was, cuffed, bruised, and pinned like a criminal against her own courthouse wall. 3 other officers jogged over, phones out, snickering like they were watching a street fight instead of an assault occurring on government property. One of them, Thompson, even mimicked her gasp for air, laughing until Martinez shot him a warning glare. Keisha grit her teeth through the handcuffing. Metal bit into her wrists, sharp and grinding. She didn't plead. She didn't beg. She didn't even speak. She knew men like Martinez, men who fed on any sign of fear. But inside her chest, a spark ignited. Not rage, not yet. Something steadier, sharper. A promise. Inside the courthouse, the fluorescent lights hummed softly as Martinez marched in like a decorated war hero returning from battle. He straightened his uniform, smoothed his hair, and lifted his chin before entering Judge Harrison's courtroom. He had crafted the lie before he even touched her. He always did. One narrative, perfected and repeated. He stood tall in the witness box, voice calm, posture confident. "Your Honor," he began, projecting just loud enough for the gallery to hear. "This morning, I intercepted an unidentified woman attempting to breach restricted courthouse access." At the defense table, Keisha sat motionless, hands cuffed in front of her, a dark purple bruise spreading across her cheek. Martinez continued, unsmiling. "She refused multiple lawful commands. When I asked for identification, she grew hostile, belligerent, threatened me and courthouse staff." Judge Harrison nodded along, his thin frame leaning forward. He was the type of judge who trusted every uniform without question, an older man, conservative, pale as paper, and painfully predictable. "And how was she dressed?" he asked. Martinez didn't miss a beat. "Like someone who had no intention of appearing before a court. Baggy jeans, hoodie, no badge, carrying a briefcase full of what looked like stolen court documents." At the gallery benches, 2 officers, Rodriguez and Thompson, exchanged smirks. They'd heard this exact script before. Different day, different target. "Did she attempt to flee?" Harrison asked. "Oh, absolutely," Martinez replied smoothly. "When I approached her, she tried to push past me, became physically aggressive. I had no choice but to restrain her using the minimum force necessary. Keisha's knuckles whitened. Minimum force. That's what he called slamming her against stone. That's what he called cutting off her airflow. That's what he called hitting her so hard her vision blurred. The stenographer's fingers flew across the keys, transcribing every lie with mechanical precision. Her expression didn't change, professional neutrality, but her eyes flicked to Keisha once, lingering for half a second too long. Suspicion. Doubt. The first crack in the room's certainty. The prosecutor stood next. Officer Rodriguez, can you corroborate Officer Martinez's account? Rodriguez stood, chest puffed out. Yes, ma'am. Martinez handled the situation with exemplary professionalism. The defendant was erratic and clearly attempting to bypass security. Officer Martinez prevented a potential threat to courthouse staff. Potential threat. Keisha almost laughed. She, a sitting judge, being described like an armed intruder. The prosecutor turned back to Martinez. And the alleged strike? Did you hit the defendant? A slight twitch crossed Martinez's jaw, but he recovered quickly. I used an open-hand distraction technique, he recited, only after the defendant attempted to assault me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Keisha didn't move. Her silence was the loudest thing in the room. Judge Harrison folded his hands. Well, Officer Martinez, based on your testimony and the corroboration from your colleagues, it appears we are dealing with a clear-cut case of resisting arrest and attempted interference with courthouse proceedings. He turned to Keisha. Defendant, do you have anything to say for yourself before I issue a preliminary ruling? The courtroom leaned forward, eager to watch another criminal beg for mercy. Keisha lifted her head. Not slowly, not dramatically, just enough to meet the judge's eyes. Her voice was calm, clear, steady. Only this. Before you rule, you may want to read the badge in my briefcase. Harrison blinked. The what? The badge, she repeated evenly, that identifies me as the judge scheduled to sit on your bench in 15 minutes. Silence detonated through the room. The gallery froze. Rodriguez's smirk evaporated. Thompson's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the tile. Martinez went sheet white. Judge Harrison's face drained of color so fast he looked ghostly. Keisha slowly extended her cuffed wrists. Now, shall we restart this hearing properly? The courtroom didn't breathe. It couldn't. What came next would shatter the entire system.
The courtroom did not move. It didn't blink, didn't whisper, didn't exhale. It simply froze, suspended in a kind of stunned paralysis as every eye swung from Keisha's bruised face to the trembling judge on the bench. Judge Harrison opened his mouth, but all that came out was a dry, clicking sound, like his throat had turned to sandpaper. He looked at Martinez, then back at Keisha, then down at the scattered papers on her table, as if the answers might magically appear between the lines. Officer Martinez? The judge finally croaked. Is this true? Did you detain a member of the judiciary? Martinez didn't answer. He couldn't. His entire body had gone rigid, like every muscle locked at once. His eyes darted to the exit, calculating distance, angles, whether he could slip out unnoticed. He couldn't. Too many eyes. Too many phones. Too many witnesses who had laughed moments earlier, and were now silently distancing themselves. Keisha didn't wait to be invited. She reached down, stiffly, painfully, and began gathering her documents one by one. Her fingers shook, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still coursing through her. This wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but it was the first time someone had done it in her own courthouse, and struck her, and choked her, and called her an animal. She stacked her papers neatly, slid them back into the briefcase the best she could with cuffed wrists, then straightened in her chair. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "I request that the officer's body cam footage be pulled immediately." Harrison blinked rapidly. "Officer Martinez, is your body cam footage available?" Martinez swallowed. It was the first sign of life he'd shown since the truth hit him like a freight train. "My camera malfunctioned," he muttered. A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. Rodriguez shifted in his seat. Thompson suddenly found something very interesting on the floor. Even the court reporter paused long enough to glance at the officer. Keisha tilted her head slightly, not mocking, not gloating, simply studying him the way a surgeon studies an infection before operating. "How unfortunate," she said softly. "Your body cam seems to malfunction every time you assault a civilian. Or is that just a coincidence, officer?" Martinez's nostrils flared. "That's not—" But he cut himself off. He knew better than to argue with her now. Keisha turned to the judge again. "In that case, we'll need security footage from the front steps, recordings from bystanders, and statements from all officers present, immediately." Judge Harrison didn't argue, didn't delay, didn't deflect. He simply nodded, flustered and sweating, and gestured to the bailiff. "Retrieve all footage. All of it. Right away." The bailiff rushed out like the building was on fire. Keisha leaned back, letting the silence settle again. She saw the fear ripple across the blue uniforms in the gallery. The shift was palpable. The room that had been rooting for her downfall 10 minutes ago was now scrambling to rewrite its role in the scene. She wasn't the suspect anymore. She was the danger. She was the one person in the room with more authority than every uniform combined, and she had been humiliated in front of them all. Harrison adjusted his glasses, voice trembling. "Judge Williams, I must apologize. I had no idea." "That much is obvious," Keisha replied coolly. Her tone wasn't disrespectful, just factual. Devastatingly factual. "But," she continued, "we're not here to discuss your assumptions. We're here to address Officer Martinez's false testimony under oath, his excessive force, his abuse of power, and the involvement of the officers who supported his lies." Thompson sank lower in his seat. Rodriguez pretended to cough, hiding his face. Martinez stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tightly a vein bulged along his temple. Keisha leaned forward slightly, and the entire courtroom leaned with her. "Officer Martinez, please repeat what you just testified." He didn't move. The judge cleared his throat nervously. "Officer, the court has asked you a question." Martinez hesitated, just for a second, but the hesitation alone was damning. Keisha's eyes sharpened. "I'm waiting." Finally, he inhaled sharply. "The defendant—" "That's enough," Keisha cut in, raising her hand. "You may stop calling me the defendant. It's embarrassing for all of us at this point." A few people in the gallery choked on nervous laughs, quickly smothered when Martinez shot them a death stare. Keisha continued as if nothing happened. "You accused me of aggression," she said calmly. "You accused me of resisting, of shouting threats, of carrying stolen legal documents." Martinez stared at the wall, saying nothing. Keisha's voice was steady, but beneath it was something colder. "You fabricated a crime." A tremor passed through the room. "You struck a woman who never laid a hand on you. You choked someone who posed no danger. You slapped a public official without provocation." Martinez tightened his jaw. "But worst of all," Keisha said, leaning forward, "you didn't just lie. You expected everyone in this room to support that lie, because you've done it before, haven't you?" Rodriguez stiffened. Thompson looked like he wanted to run. Martinez's silence confirmed everything without him speaking a word. Keisha tapped her cuffed wrists lightly against the table. "Judge Harrison," she said, "I move to dismiss these charges immediately and place Officer Martinez into custody pending an internal investigation." The judge nearly stumbled over his own feet trying to stand. "Motion granted." The words burst out of him like a confession. "Officer Martinez, you are temporarily relieved of duty pending review. Bailiff, please uncuff Judge Williams at once and escort Officer Martinez to holding." Gasps erupted. Martinez snapped back to life. "Hold on, what? You can't! I didn't know!" But he didn't finish. The bailiff moved behind him, gripping his arms with the same force Martinez had used on Keisha minutes ago. The role reversal was immediate, humiliating, undeniable. Keisha held out her wrists without looking at him. The bailiff unlocked her cuffs gently, almost reverently. The metal clinked on the table, the sound ringing like a gavel striking truth. Martinez twisted as they led him toward the doors. "This isn't over," he shouted. "She set me up. Keisha didn't even look at him. She simply smoothed her sleeve, lifted her chin, and said, "It was over the moment you put your hands on the wrong woman." The gallery sat in stunned silence as Martinez disappeared through the side door. The courtroom had just witnessed the beginning of a scandal, a reversal so swift and brutal that no one could have predicted what would unfold next. But Keisha knew. This wasn't the end. It was the opening move. The real battle was still coming.
The courthouse hallway buzzed like a kicked beehive. Officers whispered into radios. Clerks rushed between rooms with stacks of papers. Reporters hovered outside the main doors like vultures circling something they didn't yet fully understand, but could already smell would be big. And in the middle of it all, Judge Keisha Williams walked with slow, deliberate steps, bruised cheek, stiff jaw, and spine straight as a steel rod. She wasn't hiding the injury. She wasn't ashamed of it. She wanted every single person in that building to see what the system they claimed to uphold had allowed. Not one officer tried to stop her. Not one dared ask where she was going. Not one tried to explain away what happened. Her silence alone made them scatter. Inside the courtroom she had just left, Judge Harrison was still fumbling through his shock, trying to figure out how to handle the fact that he had almost sentenced an actual judge to jail on the word of an officer who now sat trembling in a holding cell. Keisha didn't spare him a second thought. Her heels clicked across the marble as she made her way to the administrative wing, the secure floor where judicial offices, clerks' rooms, and security servers were kept. She needed one thing: footage, proof, receipts. Because exposing Martinez alone wasn't enough. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for the system. The one that protected men like him. The one that looked the other way. The one that bent over backwards to question the bruised woman, but never the man who caused the bruise. When she reached the security department door, the guard nearly jumped out of his seat. Judge Williams, I wasn't expecting. I'm here for the footage from this morning. Every angle, every camera, every clip. Yes, ma'am, of course, right away. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He didn't ask why. He didn't dare. A minute later, the screen lit up with a grid of views: the courthouse steps, the front entrance, the metal detector area, and every corner where Martinez and his friends had been stationed. The footage played, and the entire ugly truth unfolded in high definition. There was Martinez blocking her path. There was his smirk. There was the slap, loud, violent, barbaric. There was his hand wrapped around her throat. There was the moment the other officers laughed. There was her briefcase spilling open. There was the fear in her eyes before she masked it. And there was the part that made Keisha go completely still. Martinez's knee on her shoulder as he shoved her to the ground. Not accidental, not defensive, not the minimum necessary force. It was domination, punishment, deep, seething hatred wrapped in a uniform. The guard swallowed hard. Your Honor, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Keisha's gaze stayed locked on the screen. You weren't supposed to, she said quietly. People like Martinez make sure of that. For a long moment, the footage looped silently. Then Keisha reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Make me a copy of everything, she said. Yes, ma'am. And a second copy, without any edits, cuts, or timestamps removed. Yes, Your Honor. He burned the files quickly, as though justice might evaporate if he took too long. When he handed her the drive, she thanked him and walked out without another word. Back in the hallway, word had already spread faster than any official memo. Law clerks parted like the Red Sea as she approached. Officers avoided eye contact, as if looking at her might summon consequences. The courthouse felt like it was holding its breath. Keisha made her way to her chambers, a small sanctuary filled with books, case files, and framed certificates from Howard University and Harvard Law. Normally, the room comforted her. Today, it felt heavy. She sat and let the silence settle, but it didn't last. Within minutes, a soft knock sounded on her door. Come in. The door creaked open. It was the young law clerk from earlier, the one who had frowned during Martinez's testimony. Her hands were shaking around a notebook. Judge Williams, I'm so sorry for what happened out there. Keisha didn't respond. The young woman swallowed. I knew something was off. The way he talked, the way he embellished. I've heard him testify before. Keisha raised an eyebrow. And? The clerk hesitated. He always has the same story, same excuses, same script, just like you said. Has anyone ever reported him? The clerk looked down. No one would listen. He's, connected. His father is a captain, his uncle is on the police commission. Keisha leaned back slowly. There it was. The rot. She nodded for the clerk to continue. A few months ago, a teenage boy came in with a broken wrist. Martinez claimed the boy resisted arrest, but I found out it happened during a traffic stop. The boy didn't even have a record. Keisha's jaw tightened. And you said nothing? I wasn't allowed, the clerk cried. I tried to speak to a supervisor, but they told me I'd lose my job. Keisha studied her for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that was low but unshakable. Then speak now. The clerk blinked. What? Everything you know. Every lie you've heard him tell, every time he's used force, every case where his story changed, write it down, sign it, and bring it to me. The clerk's breath caught in her throat. You'll use it? I'll expose him. and every superior who enabled him. The young woman nodded fiercely, tears forming in her eyes. Keisha knew then the floodgates were opening. By noon, 3 clerks, 2 bailiffs, and an assistant in the DA's office had come forward with information. Stories about Martinez threatening young men, falsifying reports, coercing witnesses, and bullying officers who tried to do the right thing. He wasn't a rogue officer. He was a symptom. But symptoms reveal disease, and Keisha was about to drag the whole infection into the light. She opened her laptop, plugged in the flash drive, and watched the video again. This time not with pain, but with clarity. Then she began typing. A report, a formal complaint, a judicial declaration. She named names, dates, incidents, patterns of abuse, failures in supervision, collusion among officers. She laid out the blueprint of systemic rot in language so sharp it could cut steel. When she finally finished, she sat back and exhaled. Her cheeks still throbbed, her wrists still burned, but her hands no longer shook. She emailed the entire file to Internal Affairs, then to the Attorney General's office, then to the Civil Rights Division. Then she sent copies to 5 trusted journalists, and lastly, the district commander of the LAPD. By the time she hit send, the room felt brighter, lighter. She had done it. She had started the war. Outside, the courthouse was beginning to ripple with gossip, panic, confusion. Inside, Keisha gathered her coat, closed her briefcase, and headed for the door. She didn't know that in less than 24 hours, the entire city would explode. She didn't know that her name would be in headlines around the world. She didn't know that the backlash would be bigger than anything she'd ever faced. But she did know one thing. She was ready. Because justice wasn't just her job. It was her weapon. And today, she had loaded it.
The retaliation began before dawn. Long before Keisha opened her eyes, long before she knew her inbox had become a battlefield. At 5:12 a.m., phones started ringing across the LAPD hierarchy. At 5:28 a.m., the district commander opened the email she'd sent and went pale. At 5:41 a.m., the police commission chair cursed out loud and dialed his crisis PR team. And by 6:03 a.m., Martinez's uncle, the same man who had built an entire career ensuring officers like his nephew never faced consequences, was pounding his fist on a conference table demanding immediate damage control. The city had not yet woken up, but the machinery of retaliation was already grinding its gears. Keisha's alarm went off at 6:15. She woke to sunlight drifting across her bedroom ceiling and the low hum of notifications vibrating on her nightstand. She stared at the screen for a moment before she reached for it, expecting messages from colleagues or reporters. What she wasn't expecting were threats. Dozens. Her heart didn't pound. It didn't race. It simply hardened.
The first message read, "You're done, bitch. Withdraw the report or we'll make sure you never sit on a bench again." Another, "We know where you live." Another, longer, almost polite. "Judge Williams, for your own safety, I strongly suggest you reconsider the accusations you've made. These kinds of claims can ruin careers, including your own. Things can get messy very quickly. Walk it back. Quietly. Now." Signed anonymously. But the phrasing told her everything. Someone high-ranking, someone powerful, someone afraid. And then there was the final message, sent at 6:02 a.m. It was only 2 words. Stay silent. No threats, no insults, no punctuation. Just a command. She stared at it for a long moment, then calmly turned off her phone. The fear they intended to provoke never reached her. If anything, it clarified things. Hitting send had pierced the armor of an entire institution.
She moved through her morning routine the same way she had every day for the past decade. Shower, coffee, suit, hair pinned back. Except today her movements were slower, intentional. The bruise on her cheek had deepened overnight, blooming across her skin like a warning flare. She covered it lightly with makeup but didn't hide it completely. Let them look. Let them see what their badge had done. When she stepped outside, the air was cool and still. Not a single reporter was in sight, not yet anyway. News hadn't broken publicly, which meant the people retaliating were the ones desperately trying to keep it contained. That told her everything she needed to know. The cover-up had begun. She drove to the courthouse without music. The quiet felt sharper than noise. When she pulled into the parking garage, 3 officers she recognized were standing near the entrance. They weren't the usual morning patrol. Their posture was stiff. Their eyes followed her car with a cold precision meant to intimidate. Keisha parked, got out, closed her door. She didn't break stride. The officers' expressions flickered, a hint of frustration, almost disappointment. They had expected fear. She gave them nothing. Inside the courthouse, a different kind of tension simmered. People whispered in clusters. Faces turned toward her, then away, too fast to be innocent. The air was thick with rumor and dread. Her clerk, the nervous young woman from yesterday, ran up to her, breathless. "Judge Williams, Internal Affairs called 4 times. The district commander wants to speak with you privately, and someone from Judicial Oversight left a message saying they need to review your conduct in regard to the accusations you filed." There it was. The system folding in on itself. She shook her head. "Thank you, hold my calls." "But—" "Hold them." The clerk nodded. But the clerk wasn't the only one watching. At the far end of the hallway stood Captain Roberto Guzman, Martinez's uncle. Imposing. Gray hair cut with military precision. Shoulders squared like he was posing for a recruitment poster. He had the stare of a man who expected the world to bow when he entered a room. He walked toward her, each step heavy with controlled fury. "Judge Williams," he said, voice smooth as wet stone. "I believe we need to talk." "No, you need to listen." His jaw flickered, the smallest tick of anger, before he pasted on a fake smile. "Let's not play games. You've made some very serious allegations, and you sent your claims to the Attorney General, the Civil Rights Division, and the press. That was, unwise." "For whom?" asked Keisha. The smile vanished. "You're interfering in internal police matters. Your nephew strangled me. Outside this courthouse. On camera. While on duty. Explain to me how that is an internal matter." People nearby fell silent. Guzman lowered his voice. "You think you can tear down decades of service with a single report? You think you're safe because you were a robe? You have no idea the kind of war you've started." "I didn't start it. Your nephew did." His eyes sharpened. "You will retract your complaint." "No." "You will modify it." "No." "You will stay silent," he hissed. "I'm done being silent." Guzman stepped closer, close enough she could smell the expensive cologne meant to mask the rot beneath. "You will be forced," he warned. She leaned in, her voice a whisper that sliced like glass. "If I die, that footage goes public, in full, from every angle, with every supporting statement. And your nephew won't be the only one facing charges." For the first time, something shifted in his posture. Not fear exactly, but recognition. She had leverage he couldn't intimidate away. He straightened, exhaled, and stepped back. "This isn't over," he warned. "You're right. It's not." He turned and walked away, but not in victory, in retreat. And that's when Keisha noticed another figure watching from behind a pillar. Martinez. He wasn't in uniform. His face was pale, his eyes were wide, jittery, flicking between her and his uncle like he couldn't decide whether to be terrified or enraged. She held his gaze. He looked away first. Good. She continued down the corridor, but she didn't reach her chambers before chaos erupted. Phones buzzed everywhere. Loud gasps echoed through the hallway. Screens lit up in a wave of color. A reporter had finally broken the story. Not the footage, not yet, anyway, but the complaint. The entire building seemed to inhale at once. And then the real retaliation began. Whispers escalated into accusations. Someone leaked a rumor that she was mentally unstable. Someone else claimed she fabricated the assault for political gain. Anonymous emails circulated accusing her of bias against law enforcement. A whisper campaign began saying she had a history of emotional outbursts. None of it was subtle. All of it was coordinated. By noon, judicial oversight had opened an inquiry, not into Martinez, but into her. By 2 p.m., officers were stationed outside her courtroom, not as protection, but as surveillance. By 3 p.m., 3 city council members released statements praising our brave officers and condemning false accusations that undermine public safety. By 4 p.m., anonymous callers were flooding her office with threats. They wanted her scared, cornered, exhausted, alone. They wanted her to break. Instead, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop and wrote, "You will not silence me. You will not intimidate me. You will not rewrite what happened." She saved the document, not for herself, for the investigation that was coming. Because retaliation is fear in motion, and fear means power is slipping. Keisha didn't need courage to keep going. She only needed the truth. And the truth was a weapon sharper than any threat they could throw at her.
They expected her to crumble. They expected her to resign quietly, to fold under pressure like so many others who had dared step out of line. What they didn't expect, what none of them could have predicted, was the uprising. It didn't begin with a protest, or a speech, or a headline. It started with a single email. Sent at 7:42 a.m. by the young law clerk who had seen everything. No name, no signature, just a subject line. "I have evidence." Keisha was in her apartment kitchen when she opened it. A simple attachment, a video file. No explanation, no instructions. Just a recording taken from a strange angle, slightly tilted, grainy, but unmistakably damning. The law clerk had captured the entire assault. Every second, every word, every strike. She wasn't the only one. 4 more emails arrived within minutes, from bystanders, courthouse employees, even a public defender who'd happened to be walking past the steps and thought she had witnessed a racially charged altercation involving an officer. She hadn't realized the woman being assaulted was the presiding judge. Each video showed a different angle, different perspectives, different pieces of truth. Together, they formed a story that couldn't be denied. And still, Keisha didn't release them. Not yet. Instead, she forwarded everything to the Attorney General's Civil Rights team with a single line: "We proceed." Only then did she open her blinds. Outside, the city was waking up, but something felt different today. An electric undercurrent thrummed through the air. At 9:12 a.m., she stepped outside her apartment building and immediately froze. People were waiting. Not reporters, not police, not protesters. Regular people. A bus driver in uniform, 2 teachers, a group of mothers pushing strollers, a teenager holding a binder decorated with stickers about justice and civil rights, a grandmother wearing a church hat, a man in a construction vest, college students, retirees, neighbors she had never spoken to. Word had spread faster than the cover-up. When they saw her,
They didn't cheer or shout. They simply stepped aside and formed a path for her to walk. A gesture of respect and solidarity. A woman holding her toddler said softly, "We're with you, Judge Williams." A teenage boy held out a folded note. She hesitated, but he insisted. Inside was a single sentence written in careful handwriting. "They hit all of us when they hit you." Her throat tightened. She walked to her car in silence, feeling the weight of every eye on her. Not judgment, hope. Hope was heavier than fear. The drive to the courthouse took twice as long as usual. Not because of traffic, because people were gathering. News travels fastest where trust in the system runs the thinnest. By the time she reached downtown, hundreds lined the sidewalks. Not chanting, not shouting, watching, waiting, bearing witness. The officers stationed at the courthouse stepped forward immediately, blocking her path with rigid, intentional positioning, a show of force meant to intimidate. But when they looked up, their expressions faltered. Dozens of cell phone cameras were pointed at them. People were recording everything. One officer, the tallest, cleared his throat and tried to sound authoritative. "Judge Williams, for your own safety, we're advising you to postpone." She walked past him. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the hallways buzzed like a shaken beehive. Reporters, lawyers, clerks, all whispering about the rumors spreading faster than wildfire. A video exists. Not alleged, not disputed, not unclear. It exists. And the Attorney General's office had already moved. By 10:07 a.m., the California Civil Rights Division announced an emergency investigation. By 10:19 a.m., 3 legal organizations released public statements condemning the assault. By 10:32 a.m., the news broke on national networks. By 10:45 a.m., the hashtag #HandsOffJudgeWilliams was trending worldwide. The system had tried to silence her. Instead, they had amplified her. The uprising wasn't loud, not yet, but it was growing in every corner of the city. People who had been dismissed, people who had been ignored, people who had been hurt by the very institutions meant to protect them. They didn't see a judge fighting a battle. They saw themselves. And then, at 11:03 a.m., the courthouse doors swung open so violently the hinges squealed. Martinez walked in. Not escorted, not restrained, not suspended. Free. Smirking. His swagger sharpened by fear masquerading as bravado. Behind him trailed Captain Guzman and 2 police union attorneys. The room fell silent. Martinez strutted through the hallway like he owned it, but his eyes flicked nervously at every phone recording him. He stopped in front of Keisha. "Congratulations, you stirred up a circus." He expected her to look away, to flinch, to hesitate. She didn't. "You're not scared?" he taunted. "No," she said. Something flickered in his eyes. A fracture. He leaned closer. "You think they'll protect you? They'll drop you the second this becomes inconvenient." She didn't blink. "You really don't understand what's happening," she said quietly. "Enlighten me." "You attacked the wrong woman." Martinez opened his mouth, but he didn't get a chance to speak. A roar erupted outside, the sound of hundreds of voices swelling all at once. Not angry, not violent, empowered. The doors shuddered. A court-martial ran up the hallway, breathless. "Judge Williams, you need to see this!" She walked with him to the balcony overlooking the courthouse steps, and when she stepped out, the full force of the uprising hit her like a physical wave. Thousands. People packed shoulder to shoulder, overflowing onto the sidewalks, climbing onto benches and planters, holding signs, raising fists, chanting her name. Not because she was a judge, because she had dared to speak. A massive banner snapped in the wind.
"We believe you." Another, "Accountability now." And another, "If she can be assaulted, none of us are safe." Her throat tightened. Below her, the people cheered. Behind her, the police leadership panicked. Beside her, courthouse staff watched with wide, stunned eyes. And somewhere in the hallway, Martinez finally understood that the system he trusted to protect him might not be enough this time. The uprising wasn't hers. It belonged to everyone the system had failed. And they weren't going home. Not until justice did.
The crowd outside didn't thin. It grew. By the next morning, what had started as a gathering became a sea. Thousands packed around the courthouse, spilling into neighboring blocks. News vans lined the street like armor. Helicopters circled overhead. Every major network carried the story. The nation had woken up. And for the first time in his career, Officer Martinez woke up terrified. He shouldn't have been. The department had promised protection. The union had assured him they would handle it. Captain Guzman had clapped his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, this'll blow over." But it wasn't blowing over. It was detonating. At 6:42 a.m., Martinez opened his apartment door to find a reporter standing in the hallway. "Officer Martinez, did you assault a sitting judge?" He slammed the door so fast the frame rattled. His hands shook as he locked all 3 deadbolts. His phone buzzed nonstop. Union calls, texts from officers, threats from strangers, messages from his father calling him reckless, messages from his mother begging him to come home to Arizona until it settled. Then the worst one came from his little sister. "Is it true?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. By 7:15 a.m., he was pacing his tiny living room, pulling at his hair, whispering to himself, "They'll cover it. They always cover it. It's fine. It's fine." But nothing felt fine. His career wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing. Across town, Judge Keisha Williams stood in her bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her suit jacket. She'd barely slept. Her cheekbones still throbbed under the fading bruise, but her eyes were steady. Today mattered. Today wasn't about her bruises or humiliation. It was about precedent, power, accountability. She applied foundation lightly, not to hide the injury, but to soften it enough for cameras. The bruise had become symbolic, and she wasn't ashamed of it. People had survived worse. Many never got justice. She was their test case. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Her aunt, Miss Lorraine, a retired nurse with the posture of a general, stepped inside carrying a thermos. "You didn't eat," Lorraine said, handing her the container. "I'm not hungry." "You'll drink this tea anyway. It's got ginger." Keisha smiled weakly. "Thank you." "You're walking into a lion's den," Lorraine said. "Just know the entire family is behind you, and half the city." "Maybe more than half." "Good. It's about time they saw what we've seen our whole lives." Keisha closed her eyes briefly. Statements like that cut deeper than the slap. At 9 a.m., she arrived at the courthouse. If yesterday had been a gathering, today was a phenomenon. Crowds wrapped around 3 city blocks. Police barricades struggled to contain them. News anchors shouted over the chants, "We stand with Judge Williams. End police misconduct. No more lies." Handmade signs waved in the air. "Her blackness isn't probable cause. Accountability equals justice. Police don't police themselves." When Keisha stepped out of the car, the crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, raised fists. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply walked forward with the dignity of a woman who understood exactly what was at stake. Inside, the courthouse was chaos. Deputy marshals flanked every hallway. The air buzzed with tension. Employees whispered her name like an omen. And in a small conference room on the 3rd floor, the police union legal team convened with looks usually reserved for funerals. The situation was no longer containable.
The Attorney General had escalated the inquiry. Federal oversight was being discussed. 2 civil rights organizations filed emergency injunctions, and 3 more women, previously afraid to speak, had contacted attorneys with allegations about Martinez. The dominoes were falling. But the real break came at 11:14 a.m., the moment that tipped the balance entirely, the moment no one saw coming. Keisha entered courtroom 7B for what was supposed to be a preliminary hearing to determine jurisdiction, merely a procedural step. Cameras filled the gallery. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Supporters packed every bench. Her bruise was visible. The whole room saw it. On the opposite side, Martinez sat stiffly beside his lawyers, desperately avoiding her gaze. Judge Henderson, a calm, sharp-eyed black man in his 70s, presided. His reputation was ironclad. He said, "Before we begin, I've reviewed new evidence that was submitted late last night." A murmur rippled through the room. Keisha kept her expression neutral. The union attorneys stiffened. "Therefore, I find it appropriate to address foundational issues regarding officer testimony and the conduct of courthouse security." Martinez shifted. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "It appears Officer Martinez has provided a written statement that directly contradicts video evidence now submitted from multiple sources." Silence. Absolute silence. Martinez's jaw locked. His lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, with respect, we were not informed that video evidence would be introduced. You were informed at 6:59 this morning. I signed the acknowledgement myself." A heavy pause filled the room. "And," Henderson added, turning his gaze to Martinez, "this court is in possession of audio footage documented through body mic bleed from 2 other officers present." Martinez froze. His attorney choked out, "Your Honor, body mics weren't activated." "They weren't, but the microphones on their radios captured the assault anyway. Not clearly, yet clearly enough." The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, in light of the overwhelming inconsistencies in Martinez's account, the state moves to remand him into custody pending further investigation." Gasps erupted. Martinez's face drained of color. His attorney shouted, "Objection! This is prejudicial!" But something happened then that broke the entire room open. A sound. A soft, glitching click as a monitor behind the judge lit up. And suddenly, there she was, Keisha, on camera. Her body hitting the wall. Martinez's hand striking her face, the slur he spat, the laughter of the officers around them, her documents scattering across the steps, her attempts to identify herself, his dismissal, his force, his contempt. The courtroom watched in stunned horror, every single second. The moment the slap landed, a woman in the gallery covered her mouth. A man whispered, "Oh my God." Even officers in the back shifted uncomfortably. The truth wasn't just visible, it was undeniable. The break point wasn't when Martinez hit her. It wasn't when he lied. It was now, this moment, when the entire system had to confront its own face in the reflection of that screen. Judge Henderson leaned back slowly. "This court," he said, each word vibrating with meaning, "is no longer dealing with allegations." He looked at Martinez. His eyes were steel. "We are dealing with facts." Martinez's chest heaved. His fingers trembled. His mask fractured completely. A marshal approached. "Officer Martinez," Henderson said, "you are hereby taken into custody on charges including but not limited to assault, battery, obstruction of justice, falsifying official documents, and violation of civil rights under color of law." When the marshal's hand touched Martinez's shoulder, the once invincible officer jerked, but he didn't fight. He had no fight left. The room held its breath, and then someone in the gallery whispered, not loud, but sharp enough to carry, That's accountability. The uprising had led them here. But the break point, the exact second the system began to bend, was the moment truth filled the room so completely that no one could look away. And the reckoning had only begun. The moment Officer Martinez was led out of courtroom 7B in handcuffs, a strange, electric silence settled over the room. No one breathed, no one moved. It was as if reality itself paused, stunned by what had just unfolded. The fall of a man who once believed he was untouchable. Cameras flashed, pens scratched across notepads, phones vibrated with rapid-fire notifications. Outside, the crowd erupted into cheers that thundered through the courthouse walls. But the collapse was only beginning. Martinez's world didn't crumble all at once. It broke in layers. The first hit came when he stepped into the hallway and found a swarm of reporters waiting. Marshals pushed them back, but questions sliced through the air anyway. "Officer Martinez, did you falsify your report? Did you know she was a judge? Is this your first misconduct allegation? Will other victims be coming forward?" Martinez hunched his shoulders, glaring at the floor as the marshals guided him through. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't have a script. His attorney's phone rang non-stop. Union representatives were blowing up his voicemail, demanding explanations he didn't have. Officers he once considered allies now avoided eye contact, afraid of being associated with him. The video made them all complicit, and they knew it. By the time Martinez reached the holding area, sweat had soaked through his uniform. His reflection in the metal door stared back at him, unshaven, wild-eyed, and suddenly small. "How did this happen?" he whispered to himself. But he already knew. He'd gotten comfortable, cocky, careless. He'd crossed lines because there had never been consequences, until he slapped the wrong woman, until he humiliated someone the system actually respected, until the world saw everything. Across the courthouse, far removed from the chaos in the holding area, Judge Keisha Williams walked into Judge Henderson's private chambers. He stood beside the window, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate her. He simply nodded. "How are you holding up, Judge Williams?" Keisha exhaled shakily. "Trying." "You did more than try. You exposed a sickness, one this institution has ignored for far too long." She swallowed hard. "I never wanted to be in this position. And yet, here you are. The truth doesn't ask permission before making itself known." He motioned for her to sit. She did. "Today was only the beginning," Henderson warned gently. "What comes next will be brutal. The public pressure, the inquiries, the union's retaliation, the personal attacks. I can handle that. I know you can. But understand this. When someone forces a system to confront its own corruption, the system fights back." Keisha stared at her hands. She knew this. Intellectually. Historically. Yet hearing it aloud made the air feel heavier. "Judge Williams," Henderson said, tone shifting, "you are not alone in this fight." "I appreciate that."
You'll need allies, legal ones, political ones, and personal ones. She nodded because anything else would feel like weakness, and she couldn't afford weakness now. At that exact moment, in a different part of the building, Mrs. Lorraine Williams, Keisha's aunt, stood in the hallway like a lioness guarding its territory. When reporters swarmed her, she didn't hesitate. "Is your niece traumatized? She's stronger than all of you put together. Does she fear retaliation? She fears nothing but silence. What do you want to see happen next?" Lorraine looked straight into the cameras. "I want every officer who laughed while my niece was assaulted to face consequences. And I want the system that allowed this to happen to answer for itself." The clip went viral within minutes. Meanwhile, Martinez's collapse accelerated. The second blow came when his father called. He answered only because he thought maybe someone in his family still believed in him. But the voice on the other end was ice. "You disgraced us." Martinez's grip tightened on the phone. "Dad, You lied. On camera. To a judge. Dad, You assaulted a black woman who turned out to be a sitting judge of the state superior court. Do you understand what you've done? What you've exposed?" Martinez's felt close. You thought you were above consequences." A beat of silence. "You thought wrong." The phone clicked off. Martinez stared at the wall. The third blow came shortly after, when his union representative entered the holding room looking tense, sweaty, uncertain. "We're pulling back." Martinez's head snapped up. "What?" "The union can't defend you. Not with the video, not with the audio, not with how big this story's gotten." You're abandoning me?" "We're protecting ourselves." Martinez's chest heaved. "I did what all of us do. I followed protocol." "There was no protocol for what you did. You assaulted a judge, and you lied about it." "They always believe us," Martinez murmured, voice cracking. "They always believe—" "Not anymore." Then came the fourth blow, the one that truly shattered him. The DA held a press conference at 3 p.m., standing at a podium with two federal officials beside her. In light of new evidence, the district attorney's office, in cooperation with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, is formally announcing a full criminal investigation into Officer Jacob Martinez and any officers complicit in covering up misconduct. Martinez watched the live stream from his holding cell. His stomach twisted violently. DOJ. Federal. This was no longer damage control. This was a career-ending, life-altering collapse. His collapse. Inside the courthouse, Keisha stepped into the hallway and was immediately engulfed by supporters who had been watching the live stream outside. She didn't bask in it. She didn't slow down. She simply nodded in acknowledgement and kept walking. Now wasn't the time for celebration. Now was the time for resolve. As she moved through the crowd, something shifted. People didn't look at her like a victim. They looked at her like a leader, a symbol, a turning point. But every symbol carries weight, and that weight pressed against Keisha's ribs as she reached the courthouse exit. Her niece waited outside with a coat. "Auntie," she whispered, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" Keisha placed the steady hand on her shoulder. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Outside, the crowd parted for her. Inside, the collapse continued to swallow the man who once believed himself untouchable. And beyond the courthouse walls, the story was spreading. Across televisions, across counties, across states. The collapse wasn't just Martinez's. It was the beginning of the system's. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning. But tonight was the fall.
The rain started just after dawn, a slow, steady fall that washed the city in a cold silver haze. It wasn't dramatic, not a storm, not thunder, just rain. the kind of quiet cleansing that felt symbolic in ways Keisha couldn't ignore as she arrived at the courthouse for what would be the final hearing in the Martinez case. The building loomed ahead, gray stone, glistening under the wet morning light. Cameras were already waiting, reporters in raincoats clutching microphones, filming the entrance as though history had chosen this spot, this moment, to rewrite a chapter long overdue. Inside her car, Keisha exhaled slowly. This was it. The end of the battle she never asked to fight, and the beginning of whatever came after. She stepped out, umbrella in hand, and the crowd surged. Questions flew, shouted over one another, a chaotic storm of voices. "Judge Williams, how do you feel today? Do you expect a guilty plea? Is this case going to change police accountability laws statewide? Are you prepared for backlash from the union?" She kept walking, eyes forward, face calm. They could shout until their voices cracked. She would not break her silence now, not before the final line was drawn. Inside the courthouse, the tension felt like static. Even the guards were standing straighter, speaking in hushed tones. Everyone sensed it, the weight of a moment that had grown far bigger than a single case, a single officer, a single courtroom. When Keisha entered courtroom 9C, the atmosphere shifted. Faces turned. Some held respect, some held apology, some held fear. The gallery was packed. Activists, legal observers, retired judges, law students, community leaders, even a few quiet officers who sat in plain clothes, their faces tight with the uneasy awareness that the ground beneath their profession was shifting. At the defense table, Martinez sat stiffly beside his attorney. The man looked nothing like the swaggering officer from the night of the incident. His hair was unkempt, grown out in uneven patches. His uniform had been replaced by a plain suit that didn't quite fit. His hands trembled, not dramatically, but enough that it showed. Keisha didn't look at him. She looked ahead at the bench. Today, she wasn't the judge. She was the victim, a detail that still felt surreal. Judge Henderson entered, the courtroom rising to their feet. His presence was steady, commanding, but calm, a quiet force that gave the room shape. After everyone sat, he took a moment before speaking, his eyes scanning the room. "This court reconvenes for final disposition in the matter of State v. Martinez." The words echoed. Final disposition. The end. Martinez's attorney rose first. He cleared his throat, eyes flicking nervously toward his client before addressing the bench. "Your Honor, after extensive discussions with the state, my client is prepared to enter a plea." A ripple moved through the gallery. Keisha felt her pulse quicken, but her face remained still. Henderson nodded. "Proceed?" Martinez stood. His legs wobbled slightly. He gripped the table for balance. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked, soft and strained, as though dragging each word out of something heavy inside him. I plead guilty, Your Honor." A wave of whispers swept through the room. Guilty. The man who once smirked into cameras, who swaggered behind his badge, who lied without blinking, now stood trembling as he admitted the truth. Judge Henderson's expression didn't change. "To all charges." Martinez swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor. All charges. Felony assault, falsifying a police report, civil rights violations, obstruction." The list was long, longer than any officer in that county's history had ever pleaded guilty to. Keisha didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter, deeper, a release, a loosening of a knot tied so tightly in her chest she'd nearly forgotten what breathing normally felt like. Henderson turned to the prosecution. "Does the state accept the plea?" The assistant district attorney rose. "We do, Your Honor." "And sentencing recommendations?" 5 years incarceration, immediate termination from the police force, and permanent decertification as a law enforcement officer in the state. More murmurs, some gasps. It was not a slap on the wrist. It was not symbolic. It was real. Henderson nodded. Before I rule, the victim is entitled to a statement if she wishes. All eyes shifted. Keisha stood slowly. Her legs were steady. Her voice, when she found it, was clear. She stepped forward, addressing Martinez directly, but not only him. Her voice carried through the courtroom like a wire pulled taut. I never wanted to be here. I never wanted to be a symbol, or a headline, or the center of a case that exposed so much rot beneath a system meant to protect us. The room fell still. But I also never expected mercy from you that night. You saw a woman you assumed was powerless, and you acted accordingly. You used your authority to humiliate me, to harm me, to intimidate me into silence. Martinez's eyes were red, wet. Keisha continued. What you didn't know is that I had spent my entire career giving people a voice in a courtroom, and that night, you tried to take mine. A breath. A beat. But you failed. A low hum moved through the gallery. Keisha's gaze shifted to the room, the watching faces, the reporters, the officers, the activists. This case is not about one officer who made a mistake. It's about a culture that convinced him he could act without consequence. It's about every report altered, every complaint ignored, every victim dismissed. This case is about accountability, not revenge. Accountability that has been demanded for years and denied for just as long. A man in the back wiped tears from his cheeks. Keisha finished softly. I accept your plea, not for your sake, but for the future of a system that must be better than what it has been. She returned to her seat. Silence followed, thick and reverent. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. Thank you, Judge Williams. He shifted his focus to Martinez. Having accepted the plea, the court moves to sentencing. Martinez's attorney braced himself. This court hereby sentences the defendant to 5 years in state custody, followed by 3 years supervised release. The defendant is permanently barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity within this state or applying for recertification elsewhere. He is additionally ordered to complete mandated civil rights training and anger management. Gasps, a few cheers, quickly silenced. Martinez sagged, shoulders collapsing inward as though the sentence had physically struck him. Henderson wasn't finished. This court emphasizes that this sentence is not only a response to your actions, but a message to every officer who believes accountability is optional. It is not. Then he struck the gavel, once. The sound echoed like a final door slamming shut. Martinez was handcuffed, again, but this time without the entitlement, without the arrogance. He didn't look up, not once. He shuffled out of the courtroom like a man finally aware of the weight of his own choices. It was done. Outside, when Keisha exited the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The crowd erupted in applause. Some shouted her name, others simply raised signs that read, "Accountability is justice," or "We see you, we stand with you." Her aunt wrapped an arm around her shoulders, squeezing tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Keisha shook her head. "We did it." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Keisha breathed deeply, freely, without the ache of tension around her ribs. The final reckoning had come, and the world, finally, had watched. The system wasn't fixed. Not yet. But today it had been forced to face itself, and it had bowed.